Sometimes you need to get information across. This is a dialogue thing I'm talking about. Sometimes you need to get information across to the readers, and the bad writing version of this is character A says, it's what they call "as you know, Bob" dialogue. As you know, Bob, we're both comic creators who are giving a talk at Leeds Central Library. Yes, Bob, we are. And it's just the kind of dialogue people will write in order purely, the characters will tell each other things that they already know, purely for the reader to get that information, okay? That's the bad way of doing it. But sometimes you do need to get that kind of information across to a reader, but you need to disguise it. How do you disguise it? Dramatizing the exposition is a tricky thing. I think the master of dramatizing exposition is Aaron Sorkin, the writer of The West Wing. He would, every episode, he would find 5 different ways of dramatizing exposition. And by dramatizing, I mean, it's what Robert McKee calls turning exposition into ammunition. In other words, you get the information that you're trying to convey to the reader or the audience, and you turn it into conflict. Like, you know, who the hell do you think you are? I'm the guy giving the lecture at the library here. I've been doing this. I've been writing comments for 8 years. What do you know? You know, and we're having an argument, but the reader has picked up that information without simply being patronised and spoon-fed the information. So dramatizing it is, you should always try and find ways to hide your exposition if possible, rather than, I mean, the thing I always hate, and it's common in science fiction, because in science fiction you're often creating new worlds which you need to kind of explain to the reader. But basically, you know, the pre-title crawl, or, you know, the year is 2525, so the so-and-so Armada, and you've got to explain everything to the reader or the audience before it all begins. I find it much more effective to just drop the reader into a situation and let them figure it out as they go along. Because, you know, hopefully if you're doing your job right, they're going to want to try and get a sense of what's going on. That's making them pay attention to your story. And then your job is to, you drip these little bits of exposition, little bits of information, and they pick it up as they go along. And that makes the reading experience for them that much more enjoyable. Nobody likes to be spoon-fed, you know. I guess the process of storytelling is all about raising and answering of questions. You'll raise a question in a scene, you know, will this guy get eaten by this tiger? And then as you go along, you'll answer one question but raise another one, answer that question but raise 3 more. And it's
he's going to get killed by the exploding helicopter.
Yeah, the tiger in the exploding helicopter, exactly. That's snow tucker, isn't it? And it kind of draws the reader through your story like following a trail of breadcrumbs. You know, you constantly if you keep raising questions but never answering any of them, after a while the reader's just going to get bored and give up, because he'll just be like, you're just messing with him, you know. And these don't, obviously, you know, it could be a mystery. It could be, you know, like the island on Lost, what's going on? That's just a constant series of, you know, raising questions, none of which ever get answered. And personally, I'm getting a little bored with that. But it doesn't have to be, you know, like mystery type questions. It'll be like will he catch the bus on time? Will he summon the courage to ask this girl out? You know, whatever it is. But it's constantly raising and answering questions to draw the reader through the story. There's different ways of doing it. I've done it a few times. Well, I co-wrote a Judge Dredd story with John Wagner, which was a learning experience. In that he would write the first, you know, episode, I would write the second one, and then we would rewrite each other's work. And I was basically doing a John Wagner impersonation in my writing. You know, he is Dredd. But we would rewrite each other's work until you couldn't tell the difference anymore. It would kind of airbrushed over the differences. So that's one way of doing it. With the example you just gave, I co-wrote, it wasn't really co-writing, it was a crossover. I was writing Thunderbolts for Marvel Comics, which crossed over with another title called Deadpool, and our stories crossed over. But in that, I simply wrote the 2 Thunderbolts episodes, and Daniel Way wrote the 2 Deadpool episodes. But there was no rewriting going on. And to be honest, it was kind of weird. It was a weird fit, because Deadpool is a very comedy character, very humorous character, whereas the Thunderbolt style I was writing was quite dark. There's a certain amount of black humor in it, but it wasn't a wacky parody style. And so it created rather a jarring effect, I think. I tried to write a slightly more wacky style to make it less jarring. But I think it would have helped if we had rewritten each other's work, frankly, on that. Like the way he wrote the characters I introduced to the team was quite different. So that was a little bumpy, I think. And at the moment I'm co-writing Daredevil with Anthony Johnston. I've asked him to help me do 3 issues, basically to help me catch up on my deadlines. And the way we're working that is that I've already got the story plotted out. He's gone away and turned that into for the first issue, he'll do like an issue breakdown of like scenes. Here are all the scenes that have to happen, and we'll knock that back and forth. And then we'll break that up into, this is all done by email and a few telephone calls. Then we'll break that up into like how many pages does each of these scenes have to be, and then we'll knock that back and forth until we're happy with it. And then he goes away and writes what he calls a 0 draft. A zero draft being not even a first draft. It's just a very, very rough, almost just bullet points and placeholder dialogue. You know, placeholder dialogue being very on the nose, clunky, but it gives you a sense of what it's going to be. And then he'll send me that zero draft, and I'll knock it into shape, basically. And then, you know, send it back to him. He might have some suggestions on how to tweak it or whatever. But that works very well for me, mainly because he's doing all the hard work. Yeah, I'm a great believer in plotting out in detail before you start. Trying to write a comic where, you know, you've got a general sense of where you're going with it, but making it up as you go along doesn't work very well in comics. You can do a novel that way. Anyway, somebody said that writing is like driving in the fog at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole journey that way. And I think it's the smartest thing I've ever read about writing. Basically, and it's very true, it's like, you know, you might not have the entire roadmap in front of you. You can only see the next scene, what the next scene that's in front of you. You can keep going that way and make it all the way through. I am a great believer in having a detailed roadmap. And I think in comics, because comics have to be tightly controlled. You haven't really got room to be self-indulgent. You need to know where it's going. Otherwise, it's what I call shoveling snow. You've got this blank white expanse, and you need to, okay, the next panel, what happens in the next panel? And then, okay, what happens in the next panel? And it's just a slog. But if you've, like I was talking about working with Anthony on Daredevil, if you've broken it down into, okay, here's the 3-issue story, here's what happens in issue 1, here's what happens in issue 2, here's what happens in issue 3. Right, issue 1. You've got a list of all the things that have to happen. Break them up into scenes. It's paragraphs. Paragraph per scene. Okay, fine. These are all the things that have to happen. How many pages is each one? And, you know, when you do it enough, I find that, I'll have maybe 5 or 6 scenes in a 22-page issue. Okay, that needs to be. You only learn this by doing it, but you get the hang of roughly you get the sense of how many pages it's going to take for that scene. You know, is that a 2-page scene? Is that a 4-page scene? And I just write down on a printout of this outline. Okay, that's about 2, that's about 3, and then add them up, and you'll get the hang. Eventually, it'll be like, that's 22 pages. Sometimes you'll add them up, and that's 30 pages. I need to lose a scene somewhere. But you get the hang. Once you get get the hang of judging how many pages these things will take. And once you start hitting 22, then it just comes from practice, really. But yeah, and once you actually know exactly what happens on each page, you know, then it becomes the actual writing process is very, very easy. Obviously I can only speak for myself here from experience, but I find that once you know what you're going to write, the actual writing takes no time at all. You know, it's very, very brief. It's the time spent figuring out what I'm going to write. That's the hard work. And when you're facing deadlines, I mean, recently I had a point where I was trying to write 5 different comics simultaneously, and it's hellish because you don't have any time to sit down and just think and plan one thing into the future in detail. You're constantly jumping from one thing to another, trying to feed artwork to 5 different artists simultaneously. And it's no way to write. So that's why I jacked in writing Thunderbolts, because I just didn't have time to juggle so many different things. I needed to just concentrate on Daredevil. But yeah, like, give yourself a roadmap. You know, give yourself a roadmap, and always simplify everything. Keep your stories. Most of the best stories I find are very, very simple. You never solve plot problems by adding more plot. In my experience, you solve plot problems by stripping away all the stuff that isn't absolutely essential. And then you make connections between what's left. If you just keep the essentials as simple as possible, but then make meaningful connections between them, then you end up with a complex story. Complex rather than complicated. Complex meaning, you know, rich and deep, where everything's there for a reason and everything has a point and everything matters. Rather than complicated, which is just this happens and that happens and it's jumbled up with characters and events, but it doesn't connect to anything. I guess that's what Ian Forster meant when he said only connect. Just keep it simple and make meaningful connections between it. You'll often find, you know, you've got different elements of story, you know, like plot and subplot, and they don't connect in any way. It just seems to be like on parallel rails. And then you'll just find a way of, if I take this scene from this plot and this scene from the subplot, and the same thing, they just join them together. You just get the light bulb over the head moment where you suddenly realise how to connect, and suddenly this is about that. I'm being vague, aren't I? It's hard to describe, but yeah, simplify and connect.